Guys, welcome back to Serial at Midnight. My name is Heath Holland, and I want to welcome back Jason and Sean Mendelson to talk about the latest Peanuts release. Guys, welcome back.
Hey Heath, Happy New Year. It's great to be with you again.
Hey Heath, good to see you.
That's a good point. Happy New Year. We're talking about Valentine's Day, but we should wish everybody a Happy New Year too, because these things come out a little bit before. Um, it's not quite Valentine's Day yet. We got to work up to it.
That's right. We have our drop date is January 17th. We've been talking about it a little bit here for the last couple months, but it really is tied into the Valentine's Day holiday and the 50th anniversary of Be My Valentine's, Charlie Brown, the special the soundtrack was written for.
I can't believe this is the 50th anniversary of that too. All of these things have been in our culture for so long. They're just part of the zeitgeist, and they still are.
One of the great things is not only releasing these soundtracks, but all of these specials are available on Apple TV Plus to subscribers right now. So you can go and check out Be My Valentine, Charlie Brown, or It's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown, or any of the specials. This one in particular, it was on TV, I think, almost every year. It was so popular that when I first got out of school, one of the first jobs I had was putting together a Charlie Brown Valentine, which is a different Valentine special based on the strips. And this one, Be My Valentine, was always one of our favorites. It's from 1975. It really is. My father always loved this one because it was one of the main themes of Charlie Brown, the Peanut strip, was the unrequited love. And so this show is all about everybody failing at love, which we can all relate to. But, and Sean will tell you more about the music, but it is part of the culture. And, one of the things that's so surprising is people don't know this has never come out before. This soundtrack has never come out before. Only one of the songs has ever been released before. And so that's part of the fun of this. It's 50 years old, but it's also brand new.
In Derek Bang's excellent liner notes, the biographer of Vince Guaraldi, Derek Bang, writes these incredible, what you guys do too, contribute liner notes to these releases. But he says that Guaraldi at this point in time we're about a decade after, I think like 9 years from Charlie Brown Christmas, and that's the only soundtrack that had come out. So he still wasn't this household name yet. It's crazy to me to think that because this music is so famous, but you just said, this music was not necessarily, you would see the specials, but you weren't necessarily putting a record on your turntable and listening to the isolated music. So there's a service that's being provided here with these releases that you guys are putting out. It is a historical record that we've never had before. And I think that's incredibly important. So thank you for that, first of all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, it's pretty exciting. And you talk about history. It's also the 75th anniversary of the Peanuts comic strip we're celebrating this year. And the music is indelibly connected to it in a way. We've talked about this before with you, Heath, on the other soundtracks. But what's great about Vince Guaraldi is that his music stands alone. And so we're able to present these soundtracks as standalone pieces of art separated from being the background music, where sometimes it's lower in the mix in the show and it's doing just that, serving the scene. But we realized when we went back and looked through all the archives and found these tapes that the music really can stand out, especially we have the opportunity on this Valentine soundtrack to show these melodies off. And Vince Guaraldi is all about the melody, and he has one theme that's the central theme called Heartburn Waltz that's performed 10 times, and it's an art form unto itself. The notion of taking a small, simple idea or a cue with an A section and a B section, and then redesigning that 10 different ways, whether it be in a minor key, a different feel, a different instrumentation, different arrangement, and he makes it fresh and interesting all the way out through the duration of the show. So to be able to reveal this 50 years later and bring to the forefront this forlorn, beautiful lyrical melody. It's really been a pleasure for Jason and I to show that to the fan.
And I also think you mentioned Derek Bang, who's our friend, and he wrote the liner notes. He also, just the end of last year, released the second edition of Vince Guaraldi at the Piano, which, if you want to learn more about Guaraldi's history, you can get the whole history of his career and life in that book. And he points out, like you were asking about Heath, that the Guaraldi at this point, he'd left his record company. He'd had some struggles with some of that independent music. And of course, as Derek points out, he had a steady gig, which for jazz musicians in the 70s was becoming increasingly rare, if not completely gone. And that steady gig was doing this Peanuts music. So he was able to record. And because of that fame, he was able to always have steady gigs. And many of his sidemen always told us not only did he have these steady gigs, he had the steady gigs on the not usual nights. And having that ability to have people get employed and play in clubs and bars or whatever the venues were that was not on a Friday, Saturday is a pretty remarkable thing. And he kept everybody in good shape. He kept his sidemen working and himself working at that time. But it's also true that he did not have the success that he would have enjoyed now because, of course, Christmas had been out for almost, I guess, a decade by this point and was incredibly famous. He'd got an Oscar nomination for this film score he wrote for the first Peanuts movie, A Boy Named Charlie Brown, nomination for that from the Oscars. But he was not really leaving the Bay Area. He didn't tour. So, like you pointed out, it was kind of, he could relate to Charlie Brown in some more ways than might have been obvious.
Yeah, I would love to actually talk to Derek at some point. Maybe I can line that up at some point.
That'd be great.
I
They would
know,
love.
because he's you talk about like I mean, there's so much information there. There's so much knowledge that is just and he always leaves the at the end of his liner notes to be like, but that's a story for another time or something like that. It's like dot dot dot.
He's teasing because he, of course, is the biggest fan of this music. And so he's doing that so that we'll release more of these soundtracks because he's been waiting for 50 years for these things as well. So he's excited too.
A couple of other notes on Derek. At the end of his foreword of the prologue to his book, he said, and this is one of the leading ideas for why we even started down this path. He said, someone has these tapes and we're going to find them someday or something to that effect. And it always stuck in my head. And that was before we actually found the tapes that I read that. And I was just trying to say, and Derek is the forefront on the history of Guaraldi, which is why he's involved with all these albums with us. He knows more about the history than anyone else. And he pointed out when we interviewed him recently that, it kind of a bittersweet thing because all the success that Guaraldi's gotten, it really blew up and a much international continuous level in the, I would say 80s, 90s, all the way to present day that he didn't necessarily get to witness in his lifetime. Yes, A Charlie Brown Christmas was huge from 1965 to when he passed away in 1976. But as far as how it's
to the Wind, all of his independent music before that too was amazing.
Of course.
And jazz was not in vogue in the 70s.
Right. He worked with Cal Tjader and all these great orchestrators and arrangers. I mean, all the jazz greats. But I think that thing where that lasting timeless quality, it didn't come into fruition until the last 4 decades after he passed.
And I'll point out quickly too that the tapes, we always had the show tapes, right? We always had the mixed down masters for the TV show, which are fantastic. But what we found during the pandemic, as we've discussed before, was the original sessions. And in those original sessions, not only do you hear Vince talking and the sidemen talking, not only do you hear the full performance. So if on the show it might be 40 seconds, maybe it's 3 minutes on the original performance, it was cut down for the cue, but also, and this is what Sean, I think, is going to want to talk about the most, is you get to hear all of the instrumentation, the instruments and their performance in full in a sound recording release, as opposed to being mixed underneath the dialogue and effects. So one of the great things is, particularly on this album, we could talk about the ARP string ensemble instrument, which is this synthetic toy that Vince picked up, but you get to hear Vince play all the other instruments that are on the mix, but buried underneath that ARP. You get to hear them really come to life on these records in stereo. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's talk about the music itself. Because what's really cool about all of these soundtracks is that none of them sound the same. They all have a different tone and an approach and different instruments and different instrumentations. And, one of the previous soundtracks we talked about had sort of a bossa nova sort of a feeling. This one brings in the Fender Rhodes and this real, like, warm I don't know. It makes me kind of sad, to be honest with you. It's got this because of the themes of the special in the first place. There's this like unrequited love theme, and I don't know. We're talking about some of the instruments that created some of these great ballads and power ballads of the 1970s into the 80s. It's got a whole different sound. So let's talk a little bit about Sean. Let's talk a little bit about some of these instruments.
I love that you mentioned that. The Fender Rhodes became his main instrument on these Peanut specials, I would say, in the 70s. That's what delineated his 60s, 6 or 7 specials to the 9 or 10 that happened in the 70s. And you spoke exactly right about it. The Fender Rhodes, that warm tone, which is forefront in this score, along with a very delicate, and I use this word very specifically, lyrical melody. It's something that you can just feel the heartstrings. It's as sappy as that sounds, as corny as that sounds. Furthermore, he layers this. It was 2 months on the market, the ARP string ensemble synthesizer. And he layers the harmony. It's just a padding. It creates the impression of a string orchestra that sits behind his main melody on either the keyboard or the piano. And it just creates that forlorn, innocent feel. And why it works, and what my dad I did brilliantly by bringing Guaraldi to the Peanuts franchise, is that connective tissue between Schultz's writing, pathos, and what Guaraldi does with music, which is embolden that pathos, make it something that is connected. Now, before we go on, most importantly, I brought my guitar today. We're going to see if this works. When we talked to Stuart McCain, who played bass on this, he told us, and this got me thinking a lot when we were making these albums. He told us Christmas Time Is Here works, and I always kind of knew this, but he put it perfectly. Simple melody with lush jazz chords. It's accessible. So what Guaraldi does on this album, we released a 50-year-old single a couple of weeks ago, Paw Pet Overture, is he creates, beyond just creating simple melodies that are accessible to the mainstream, he takes these jazz chords that are on the fringe and he goes like this. This is a B flat, flatted 9 chord that this Paw Pet Overture starts with. Ba-da-da-dum, and then it goes to an E7 sus4. Ba-da-da-dum, bum, 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 bum. You don't need to know what the chords are. You don't need to be musically inclined. All you need to know is it's unbalanced, unusual, has notes outside of the key. And then he goes into this bum, 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 bum. And then the chorus, if you will, the refrain in the music is very primary accessible chords. He does it on Joe Cool too. And he's just going 1, 5, 4, 5. Fascinating, and to Stuart McCain's point, is he connects jazz world to the mainstream. If I had to guess, that's the trick. That's why his music is timeless and remains to this day. He brought people into jazz, but he kept them by keeping these chords that were familiar and part of rock and roll and mainstream. He wasn't afraid to connect those two worlds together.
That was beautiful. Well, and then to your point too is there's a bonus track here that I want to reference called Last Call for Love, which has got some incredible bass stuff that doesn't say, it's not like really jazz. It's not like necessarily a jazz thing. It's got like I don't know. There's elements of all sorts of things in there, blues, and there's a little funk.
This Last Call for Love is beautiful because it's long. It's 5-6 minutes of them just jamming at the end of the session when they were recording this session in 1975. And the fact of the matter is, I just talked to Stuart McCain a couple days ago. We had him on with you, obviously, a few months ago for You're Not Elected, Charlie Brown. He told me in the early 70s, I didn't even know this, and I'm a musician, there was an 8-string bass he played with his new wave jazz band. And he thinks, when I was talking about that particular tune, Last Call for Love, and I would suggest also on our bonus track, There's Been a Change, he thinks he was playing his 8-string bass. And I asked him, because he plays the bass, there's this warm tone, what's called a double stop, where he plays 2 bass notes together, which is highly unusual. Bass lines are usually always individual notes. But he created this warm, deep, rich sound that, like you said, it's its own place, its own vibe. And I'm so excited for the fans to hear this different side of this trio with Seward McCain, Vince Latiano, and Vince Guaraldi.
It's a great jam. We love it because it's long. It picks up in the middle and it ends in the middle. That's what was on the tape at the very end of the session. And it's a really nice way to end this record. Again, we'll point out this is the longest record we've done to date. It's 42 minutes. It's the entire soundtrack plus a ton of bonus material with alternate mixes where we bring out even more of the instruments that you either can't hear or weren't used in the final mix of the show. And then we cap it off with that very long Last Call for Love. And we think it's gorgeous. We love it as a record. It's also on CD. It'll be out digitally. It is the longest one we've done. A lot of these, the fun of this has been, we think we know what we're going to get because we're intimately familiar with the TV show. We've heard it for 50 years and we know exactly what songs we love the most from the show and what drive the story in the show. And then we get into mix these and you get a totally new impression of what's going on. And it still tells a story. It tells pretty much the same thematic story as the TV show, but the music speaks all on its own, like Sean was talking about earlier. And even in putting it together, it's a big struggle of, where do we put this one? And usually it's pretty obvious, but there's always places where we can sort of take some liberties with that on the bonus material. And it's no exception with this final song. We don't know where it came from, but we love it. And we think it's another really special thing. The key with this music is it's been buried in a vault. It's never been played. Those tapes were played once to make the mix for the show, and then they've been locked away untouched this whole time. So they still sound perfect. Nothing's fallen off of them. We go to mix them. So
this is the best. This is the best or second best, subjectively, of my choosing, soundtrack from the 70s. So it shows off that Fender Rose. I wanted to show everybody this is the Heartburn Red version of the record stores that they can get. So check out.
Just to do the commercial part of that. That's that red one is only your independent record stores, a part of Record Store Day indie exclusive. Can I show these off now?
Of course. Yeah.
There's also I got to hear. There's the Barnes and Noble has, and we have these Obies so you can tell which one is which. So Barnes and Noble has, that one's called Heartburn Red. This one is called Puppy Love Pink. They're all bio-vinyl, which means they're made out of industrial waste gas. So they're all made out of
cooking oil. I'm a huge climate activist, and I'm so stoked to be riding the wave of sustainable products.
Here's the black one. But I'll give you the secret on the B side. This puppet is part of the TV show. In the credits, they animated Vince Guaraldi as a puppet. They did that with Lee Mendelson and Bill Melendez, but also with John Scott Trotter, this music supervisor, and Vince Guaraldi. So there's all these cool little art pieces that are little secrets, little Easter eggs from the TV shows that we've tried to replicate in the records too. But we think it's a really, really good LP. I won't tell you till we release all of them what my favorite is. Sean can say whatever he wants. Why are you walking away, Sean, in the middle of this?
He's done.
I wanted to show a little Easter egg for those of you that are watching this. We really appreciate it. That's our dad in puppet form in the credits. It's on the back of on the Obi strip.
Bill Melendez.
And our dad. Yes. Our dad's the one without the facial hair, and the one with the facial hair, which is similar.
Gave away our biggest secrets on these things.
All right, we'll cut that out if Jason doesn't want
to. I don't care. It's great. But then there's also, like I said, the CD also has some interesting pieces to it. It's very similar in the cover art, but there's little secret surprises inside on the CD art too, like we always try to do. But I think, again, we're very proud of it. We've been waiting to release these things forever. So it seems like forever. And now that we're so close, it's like unbelievable, at least to me, because I am excited for everyone to get to hear, again, music we all know, but you're going to hear it really for the first time.
The best art comes out of the blood, sweat, and tears that people put in it. Even though we had nothing to do with Vince Guaraldi actually making this 50 years ago, we definitely want to honor him the best way possible. And that's where we're our leading.
Well, that's the beginning and the end for us on all of this is we're trying to let people know that we've known all our lives, not only how great Vince Guaraldi was as a composer and as a performer, but just the ability he had as we go on this journey with him again 50 years later to improvise and to come up with new ways, not just brand new compositions, but like you mentioned, brand new ways to do Linus and Lucy. Every show he does Linus and Lucy, and he does it a different way. Totally different style. He did the same thing in his live performances. He was always experimenting and taking what people loved and adapting it to whatever he was doing. And even more so on this album in particular, like Sean already mentioned, there's 10 different Heartburn waltzes, the same composition, but serving a totally different purpose for the characters in the show and a different style, even with just the three musicians, even though Vince plays multiple instruments. And that is where we get, to me, it's like trying to figure out this secret sauce from what he did so long ago that I took for granted too for so many years, because he just did it. He performed. He'd show up in the studio and lay this down, and it was perfect for the show. And now our hope is it's perfect for the listening audience to hear it as its own fully realized, musical album.
I think that's a good place to maybe wrap this one up. I'll put links in the description where people can buy or pre-order all of these, excuse me, all of these different editions. What do you want to tease anything? You got anything else you want to talk about before we wrap up?
I do, but can I just do one real quick thing? I just would like to say when we're recording this, it's right in the middle of the Los Angeles fires. They're still raging. And I just wanted to take a moment to send our sympathies to our friends and everyone that's going through that horror experience, that horrific experience in Los Angeles. Many of our partners are down there. People that worked on these albums are down there. Their families are down there. And even people we've never met are going through a really horrific time. And I know not just from the fires, but the complications resulting from it, from all the horrific damage that's done, but also the loss of power and the traffic and the fear. And I just think that, while we're talking about this great album, I did want to acknowledge, since everyone's living through that right now, we just wanted to send our sympathies. I do know that for Sean and I, we've donated to the Red Cross, and there's a bunch of other charities, but the redcross.org is accepting donations specifically to help people going through the suffering of the fires down there. And I encourage others to do what they can in that space. And I also do think I would love to tease, this will be the first time we've talked about it on a happier note, that the next album we're going to release is It's the Easter Beagle, Charlie Brown, which celebrated its 50th year last year. But that one is available now. But I don't have too many details to share, because a month from now, I think this will be coming out in January, but in February, we'll be releasing details on the variants and configurations for that. But it will come out March 21st. But I wanted to at least let people know that is the next thing on the radar. I know many fans have been clamoring for it. We're really excited about that one too. So that's your big tease. You got the exclusive tease from us on this.
Will you come back and talk to me about that when you can?
As soon as I'm able to do that, I will. If you want us, we will be there. It's going to be great too. It's completely different, even though it's a year older than Be My Valentine's. It's a completely different thing to talk about. And we're happy to do that.
Sean, any last words about the soundtrack, about the music that we're talking about?
Yes. While he embraced the future, meaning all new technologies, things like the ARP synthesizer, and while he embraced any new technologies, whether it become a different synthesizers, electric piano, new devices, he also revered the classics. And on this album, we have Freddie's Mood, which is a Chopin reference, a Bach track. And what he does is what I like the term, I don't think I've coined it, but I've been using it regularly, Guaraldifies the classical pieces. So he adds drums and makes drums and bass and makes a bossa nova version of a classical Chopin piece, and makes it his own. if you listen carefully, you hear his voice in the show. There's another Easter egg in the show and on the soundtrack. He goes, "Hey, well, I got to come up at the end here." Something like that. He says right in the middle of that track. So you diehard fans out there, listen for that. And I just want, on that note, looks to the future, draws from the past. That's why he was a great arranger too.
Very good.
I do want to add one more thing before people chop our heads off on Freddie's Mood. In the television show, Snoopy's playing the record for the puppet show. And that's where the Chopin comes in, the show I was just talking about. And during that scene, they purposely messed up the sound. It sounds like an old-timey phonograph. And we left that in the album as manipulated to sound old-timey. We also leave in there the complete clean track of it as well. So you can hear the original performance at the end because it's also replayed in the show in the credits, but you can hear the full clean version at the end in addition to the old-timey version that matches the show's presentation too.
You want to hear something funny is that I was listening to that record. I'm breaking in this turntable. I got somebody sent me this turntable to review, and I was breaking it in, and I got to that track, and I was like,
"Oh no,
is this what it's supposed to sound like?" And I mean, I remember the special and everything, but I had to listen to it on a separate second unit just to make sure that it was
that's
performing
why
like it was.
It's in Sean's liner notes too, but I knew, that's the problem with it. You'd be playing it going, this sounds really bad. What's wrong with my player? So it doesn't open the A side or the B side of the album, obviously. But if you are playing it and you get to the Chopin, which is called Freddie's Mood for Frederick Chopin, if you get to Freddie's Mood and it sounds warbly, like your record is warped, that is intentional for that one track. And we apologize for any confusion it causes you or Heath or anyone else in that capacity.
I think everybody's going to have a heart attack when they first hear it, unless they've watched the show more than 5 times. They're going to be like, what happened? But that's the fun of it.
Yeah. And what's so immediate too, but I will say that the bio vinyl sounds great. You guys know I won't say I was skeptical. Okay, I was skeptical.
I was
like, oh, yeah. But it sounds really, really good. Like, it doesn't sound any different than standard vinyl, and it actually sounds better than a lot of new pressings that I've listened to for other things. So, success.
The key, thank you very much. We appreciate that. We appreciate your feedback the first time around we did it. It's very important to Sean and I that we try to do things sustainably in our lives as much as possible. And so when we started to do these records, we wanted the most important thing was that it sounded good. And once we were satisfied that was the case, we're very happy to have done these in this sustainable way. But the whole point of this is you hear Vince Guaraldi playing, and that's the North Star for everything we've been doing. And I think we're very proud of how it turned out for that in that way too.
And I do want to just shout out Coldplay and Billie Eilish, who are the mainstream artists doing things like Eco and Bio Vinyl and all the different presses. I think, and there's an article that just came out, the music industry is going that direction. I think most people, now that they are trusting it like you did, and like other people were skeptical at first, they trust that Bio Vinyl and products similar to it are going to be the future. So I'm excited about riding that sort of sustainable wave as the industry changes for the better.
And again, to us, it sounds as good as we could make it sound in any way. And the fact that we can have our cake and eat it too is incredibly satisfying and rewarding to us.
I think that's a great place to leave it. I'm going to remind people that the links in the description of this episode pick up some cool music, and I guess we'll put a pin in this until we reconvene to talk about Easter music, right?
That'd be great. Our goal is to get at least one of these out a year. We got 2 out last year, 1 in 23. Obviously, we have 2 coming out that we can announce right now, but our goal is to get this music to people as quickly as we can. We know for many people it's not fast enough. For others, it's too fast, but we're trying to get it out there to make ourselves happy as well as everybody else that loves Vince Guaraldi and loves Peanuts.
And thanks for having us, Heath. It's been a pleasure talking with you as always. Look forward to the next time.
Yeah, love talking to you guys. Until next time.